Hello, everybody. This is a spontaneous coffee with Kari today. I'm not going to be around Friday, and had a little time today. So we're just jumping on for a Tuesday coffee with Kari. Yeah, this is why you can never catch me live if you can never catch me live, because I'm a little all over the place. But welcome so this is where I, Kari the Mortician, and answers your questions live in this situation. And then you can always watch it back later if you didn't catch it and drop your questions and I can answer them later. Good morning, Robin. Welcome. Hey, Damien. Hey, Stacy. Glow in the dark and from Scotland. So fun. So my one question I'm jumping into, good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's kind of fun to do this randomly. I don't know why. It's just fun. Hey, welcome from Ohio. Hey, Trevor. Hey, Pat and Amy and Mary and Susan and John and Marcia and Steve. Welcome, everybody. So my first question, I have a barber friend who is interested in cutting hair for the deceased. However, he was curious about the mechanics of it all. Does the cutting happen after embalming? Does it take place in the prep room? The decedent is left in the reclining position? Is it usually done by the embalmer? So these are really good questions. I'm comfortable cutting a woman's hair for the most part, but the barbering side, I can fake my way through a little bit, but I'm always nervous of that one snip that I just can't reverse. So I need some skills in barbering a little bit more when I do care for men that need a little trim up the side. So the person would be embalmed. The hairdresser or barber would come in later when we're getting them ready. It depends on the preparation room and their setup. They may have a separate dressing area. They may bring them into the chapel for when you come, but they are going to be laying down, typically on what we call a dressing table. It's just a flat table that rolls and it'll fold in half when we need to store it. So they may be on the prep table or that dressing table. It depends on if they're dressed or not. They may just be covered up by a sheet. So there's all these different stages. And if the barber needs to come before we're ready to dress them or vice versa, there's no like one set rule behind this. However, they're going to be embalmed if there is an embalming. And so you are working with the back of the head on that head block. And they're going to be in a pillow. So from only about here forward, does it kind of matter? You're not going to trim along their neckline because you don't really get back there. So this is what you see. And we try when we embalm to brush the hair the best way that it can, but you may have to wet hair and start from scratch, especially with women often. There's some embalmers who will just comb that hair straight back after they're done. But if you've got to bring it forward for bangs or anything, it's really difficult if they've brushed it all back, because then you have to wet it and dry it. It gets to be a little more difficult. So I always like to brush the front forward a little bit because it's easier to pull back later than to pull forward later. You're working against gravity too. Women's hair is not going to stay up here. It's going to fall back to the pillow. So you do have some challenges. Embalmers do the hair though, or the care center staff does the hair, but sometimes people have their own hairdressers come in. It's not as common as it used to be because I think like the smaller town used to, they always went to the same person, but now it's a little more spread out. It just isn't as consistent anymore that I see hairdressers coming in. Some funeral homes will have a person on retainer where every time they have someone that needs their hair done, they call the one person and that person comes in. And it can be good extra money for a hairdresser or a barber to do that. So, if he's interested in doing that for funeral homes, tell him to go around and get his card out and connect with people and see if he can, get some business drummed up that way. I think it's really good to do. How is a bath given? Is there a bathtub? No, they're just washed on the table. And the table has a little trough that goes around the side. So the water runs down that. So you're just washed on the table. Mullets for all. Yeah, so you go into all eternity with a bit of a mullet sometimes. Hello, Catherine in the UK. Welcome. What legal paperwork should we all have in order to help our loved ones with our funeral preparations? Marcia, go watch my When I Die video that I just did about getting everything in order and having a legal will that is filed. Writing your own will and sticking it in your drawer at home does not make it legal. It just is a piece of paper at that point that your family could use, but it doesn't mean it enforces an executorship. You want to make sure somebody can be in place to take care of your assets after you die. That's one big one. I am also a huge advocate, if you are a parent, to make sure that you and your significant other have things in place for somebody to care for your children. If you are to die together in an accident, this happens and your family doesn't get to decide, the court does. So get things in place for that worst case scenario. It sucks to think about. I'm not going to deny that. But making sure your family's set up just in case that bad situation does happen is not a bad way to do things. You get life insurance, right? Because you're going to die at some point, right? So why not have everything else in place as well? We do like hose and washcloths or sponges for bathing. So all different styles. But do you have busier times of the year? Is winter busier than the summer? No, not usually. I would say up until this year, I usually have seen a little bit of a lull in December and then January super busy. However, we had the COVID spiking that second round this year through those months. So it was a bit off because of that. But and then July, end of June, July, sometimes we've seen some spikes. Otherwise, it's decently consistent. Kaylin, my brother N died from one punch from former heavyweight champ Mike Tyson. That's not something I expected to read right now. Like, I want to Google that immediately. I think we all are probably trying to Google that immediately right now. So I'm going to have to go Google that. That's crazy. I don't even know what else to say about that. I have to look into that. That is a insane thing. Wow. I cannot imagine the media circus that you would have been enthralled in after that. That had to have been just crazy for you. Have you ever done calling hours at someone's home? A few times, but not often. It's not very prevalent here. Not prevalent. It's not very predominant here. Aw, thank you for the love. I love, you guys are so sweet to me. What would be your epitaph? I'll have to think on that one. Is the charge for embalming depending on what needs to be done? For example, if a person needs a lot of restoring, is that a higher fee than a typical embalming? It's such a good question, Lee. So embalming will be one line item. Then some funeral homes will have an autopsied body preparation and a organ and tissue donor preparation. So there may be an additional charge for those two situations. Many funeral homes say, it's not the family's fault that the individual died in the way they did, or that they donated organs and tissue and that it takes longer. So they don't see that you should charge for that. However, there are funeral homes that say, we're going to have to put in more hours and more materials, so we do need to charge for that. So you get two varying differences of opinions on it, but you may see those, but they need to be on the general price list, line itemized. Do you know anything about the Fisk iron coffins? I've heard, and someone actually sent me something last week about those. So I need to look into them and add them to my list. Oh, hey, Andrew. Hi, buddy. So fun. Many local newspapers, the source of choice for local obituaries, are folding, a sign of the times. Where do people turn for local obituaries when that happens? Do they have to search the webpage of every funeral home in town? What is the experience among your many viewers? We get calls at varying funeral homes that say, well, my friend died. Where's their obituary? People do not have to run an obituary. it is up to the family if they want to do that. Some families want to experience their loss in private, and they don't want everybody to know. They don't want information out. Especially I found in the last year when families were not allowed to have services or were not having gatherings, we were doing less obituaries because they didn't see that there was a need to run a notice in the paper if they weren't inviting people to a public event. So sometimes we will just run maybe a brief one on our website to let people know they've died, or run nothing at all. I know that frustrates people. There's some people who just watch for the obituaries and they want to know how everybody died and what's going on. And, you know, the kind of nosy Nancy people where they just want to know. And it frustrates them that they don't get to know about certain things. But we find that a funeral home website is going to be one of your main good sources for information on the local deaths, because they don't charge for those most of the time. Where newspapers to run in print can be, you know, $300 to $1,000. Even running online for newspapers, they charge for that. So you will find that many will just place them on the website, or even in a local paper that's like $20. You know, there are some of those out there still. Are we ever too old to be organ donors? Never. You don't really age out for the most part. I think that, and I could quote this wrong, but when I was working with Gift of Life to do the video with them, I believe they had one of their oldest donors at like 83 or 85 or something. I could be totally wrong on that, but they have started taking older donors and finding that they can still use some viable tissue from them. At a graveside service, is it best to leave the casket on the church truck or to leave it over the grave? I worry that the casket might roll off grave lowering device. Definitely, you can get nervous about that. I won't say never. I'm trying to think, even an instance, I've never used a church truck at the cemetery. We always just carry right from the back of the hearse over to the lowering device. Sometimes it might be a mock setup. So if the grave is maybe caving in because of the type of soil or a situation, if it's really wet out, they may do a mock setup where they put the lowering device off to the side, set the casket on it, have your service, and then after people have left, they will then maybe do the vault above ground and then lower the whole vault with a casket in it down in the ground. Safer for the people that are working, and it's just a lot cleaner and nicer for the family. Are you sure the people you receive are really dead? Yes. Usually they have been dead for a while, and there are very evident telltale signs. They're coloring, smell, a lot of different things. Definitely if someone has just died and they're very warm, you may think, oh, I wonder if they are really gone, but I've never really worried about that at all. Ricky, they should be careful of making a claim such as this or be subject to a lawsuit. I have no idea what you're referring to. Hold on, I'm trying to see if I can tell. Yeah, Ricky, I have no idea what you're talking about in reference to, so if you could explain. Have you ever had to put a little person in an average size casket? And if so, would you get the person to stay in place? Devon, that's a great question. I know that this was one thing that we had talked about with the Watts family, was that each of the little girls were in their own full-size casket because they had to have some additional things in there to protect their bodies. Not often. Usually, like children or smaller individuals would be in a smaller casket, but you would be surprised. It is a decent jump from a smaller casket up to standard size that, you know, 12-year-olds, they go in a larger casket. You know, you'd be surprised at the age that people will go in a larger casket, in a normal size casket, I guess I would say, because of their height and such. And they just stay in place. They might slide down and back depending on the driver of the hearse if you're transporting, but typically not. When a person passes away and they have a full beard, do you have to shave it or can you keep it at the family request? No, you do whatever the family requests when it comes to hair, and facial hair included. Oh, that you think she's not really truthful about her brother being killed? I'll have to look it up. I have no idea. I don't watch boxing really. Trevor, you're welcome. Thomas is asking, are you familiar with rent-a-caskets? People see a normal shell, but the person is buried in a plastic corrugated box. Yes, rental caskets are a thing. You pay to rent the shell, but you pay to purchase the interior. There are some that have that plastic, it looks like a little butter dish container, or it's a cardboard corrugated box inside that the person goes in. So there's a few different versions of a rental casket, but the shell is what is repetitively used, and the interior is a one-time use only. And people are like, why are they so expensive? Well, because it's typically a higher priced casket, and then the use of that has to be broken over so many people. And so there's kind of a whole formulation to it, but you're still purchasing the interior and paying tax on the interior, and you're renting the shell, which only has so many uses, especially depending on if you're moving it from the funeral home to a church and back into the car and then back into the, things get banged up and things get worn out. And then eventually, oftentimes you'll then, sell the shell or donate the shell for a family as long as they buy the interior in certain situations, for them to be buried in or cremated in or something. Ricky, yeah, I have no idea. People can claim anything really, so I have no idea. I heard that Muslims are buried in an upright position instead of horizontally. Is this true? Not anywhere that I know of. I know we've talked about a upright burial at different cemeteries. I still have not found one that has it done. There's one national cemetery someone says they do it at that I need to look into. So Muslims, the ones I have been a part of, they do bury where they roll the person to their side a bit, that they're facing the sunrise. And so they are positioned a bit differently because of that. Barbara says, huge thank you to Kari for your videos. Both my teenage boys have a binder, each with copies of important paperwork, birth certificate, and everything. That's so amazing. I love organization, and I think that's awesome. Aw, thank you. Do you think I look cute today? I'm kind of color coordinated with, I'm giving my hand at some flowers. I feel like I need some flower fun things. So you can still see the price stickers on them. We'll give that up, because I'm not a flower arranger, funeral director, not flower arranger. So I'm trying some things out here. Trying them out. Why are funerals so expensive? Well, what does expensive mean to you is one thing. People paying $7 for a coffee is expensive to me. So it depends on your pay versus value. So I've sat down with families and they're like, wow, that's really not very expensive. I thought it would be way more. And I sit down with people that say, wow, that's super expensive. So the word expensive is really a relative thing. I'm going to say anything you got to spend over $1,000 on is pricey. It's not a common everyday thing that we're going to do unless it's something that's maybe enjoyable, and funerals are not enjoyable. And so it's definitely something you don't want to be spending that money on, which makes it harder. However, funeral homes have overhead. They are a business. It costs a lot to have staff on retainer 24/7 and ready to go as soon as a death occurs. It takes a lot of overhead to have all the equipment necessary, to have the vehicles necessary, to have the space necessary. I will tell you that some of the people who say they want to spend the least demand the most of us in many situations. Well, why aren't you available to do this? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Well, being available and doing those things costs money. You can't call your doctor and just show up at the office whenever you want. Some people can, but you can't do that. they have certain office hours and they have certain this and that, and they charge you a lot of money. Your insurance gets the bill a lot, but we are not this super high-end business because we're raking on all this money, but we have a lot of overhead. We care for people. We do a lot at no cost, but we do have to have charges for things. Caskets cost and are pricey because wood and metal cost a lot. They're materials that can be used up. And so as those fluctuate, lumber is super expensive. Have you bought lumber for anything in the last 2 years? It's super pricey. So that means lumber for caskets is going to be super pricey. So it all makes all the sense. And our price lists are very regulated. You can ask for a price list up front if you think you can find a better price, then go to a different funeral home. So you don't have to use the first funeral home you walk into and talk to. You can always ask for price lists up front. Look those over before you ever have any other conversation with someone. Thank you, Plumber Guy. My husband, Tony, passed away and they charged extra for his coffin as he was plus size. Is that wrong or can do something about it? They're not charging extra for his coffin. They're just charging you for the price of the coffin. You're going to have different pricing along the board. You can, let's say you go from 1,000 to 2,000. If you take the same model casket, the exact same features, everything on it, and let's say for a standard size, it's 1,000. Well, you're going to have more material in terms of the metal, in the interior, everything about that casket you have to have more of to build it. Well, that's more material, which means it has to be more money. So it's not that they're charging you more for the same item. They're charging you for more product. So it's completely legal. They're not doing anything illegal, but there are also not as many options for an oversized casket as there are for a standard casket. So you might have to charge, or you might have an option that is more expensive just by the fact that there's not as many options, if that makes sense. But it doesn't mean they're doing anything illegal because they're charging more for more product. Hey, JW. Someone died in my apartment block last night. The ambulance arrived at 10 o'clock. Just after 11, the funeral home arrived to collect the body. It's pretty quick. It happens pretty quick sometimes, Steve. Yeah, when a death occurs that people come. What's my opinion on Costco selling caskets? I think it's fine. It's actually interesting. Our local Costco, right when that started happening way back, they had the display in the store and stuff, and they don't even have the display there anymore. It's all online. You know, it's the same kind of company as Walmart. Walmart sells caskets. Amazon sells caskets. You can buy caskets from anywhere online. There are laws in place to protect people who want to purchase from that third-party vendor. Funeral homes cannot ask or cannot charge you for bringing in a third-party casket. They cannot charge you an additional fee. They cannot make you be there when the casket is delivered. They can only do that if they require every family they serve to be there when the casket's delivered. However, they can require the same things of any other company. They have to be delivered at certain times during the day. They have to take away all of their packaging material if the other casket companies do the same. So there are these rules and laws in place to protect consumers wanting to use a third-party casket. Always remember, though, we don't control the quality of those caskets. And if it is going to arrive the day of visitation and it arrives in damaged condition, then you're kind of out of luck. So there are some variables to it. And in the end, I will say, knowing many people's price lists, there are a lot of places you're not saving any money in the long run. So it just depends. Does a funeral home ever deny due to a lack of space or availability? I know during the peaks of the coronavirus, yes, places were saying, I'm sorry, we're full. That doesn't usually happen. You may have to schedule out a day or two if there's a busy spell going on. But if they physically have run out of room for bodies, they can't really do anything about that. Can you be buried with any sort of possessions? You can be buried with anything. Anything you want, really, and it does happen. Kari, I had a friend of mine drop dead of a heart attack back on December 9th at a truck stop in Nevada. He was an over-the-road truck driver. I've buried several individuals who died while out trucking, and they were found in their cabs or their car at rest stops, or one was on the side of the road. It's a tricky situation because sometimes it takes a while to get them back because they do have to do autopsies or figure out what's going on. It does, take a little bit of time to get them home, but I've had that situation several times. Have you ever visited Arlington? I have, but I was much younger. I went in high school for a second time, and I think I would like to go now where I can appreciate it more. You don't appreciate things when you're younger. Sorry, guys, but you don't. When you're a child, you don't appreciate the magnitude of things like that. When you're a teenager, you still don't appreciate the magnitude of things like that. And so as an adult, you have a much worldlier view and understand history more and things. And so you can appreciate, as experience grows in you, you appreciate things in a different way. Sorry, guys, I'm like chowing on coffee this morning. He was an over-the-road truck driver. They cremated him instead of burying him. Have you ever buried someone in their car? I have not. So there are a few stories of this, and there's lots of pictures of it all over the, you can Google and find this. There was a lady in Texas was buried in one. There's another man, I think I'm trying to think what he was buried in. I feel like someone was buried in like an excavator or something weird like that too. The funeral home didn't allow my husband to be buried with his motorbike. Is that wrong? Well, as long as you would pay for the space, it's not going to fit in the casket with him. You would have to purchase a much larger oversized casket and burial space, or buy a secondary burial plot for that to happen. How do crematories know if there's a pacemaker? The funeral directors check the body, and the family has to sign in their authorization and declare if there is a pacemaker, because then they have to be allowing the funeral home to surgically remove it. So there's kind of a triple check system. However, some still get through. Maybe the family doesn't realize the person had a pacemaker, or the funeral director doesn't see it. Pacemakers are made really small now. And those don't always have to be removed because the battery is so small it doesn't cause the problems. But sometimes it just gets missed and it doesn't, explode. But typically there's a check system along the way. Do you have any upcoming videos on particularly magnificent cemeteries? I do not. I haven't done any cemetery tours in a while. They're not, in terms of my interest, they're not my highest interest when it comes to things to cover, and they take a lot of time to edit. But I haven't traveled really at all to go anywhere with any cemeteries. So once I'm starting to travel a little bit more, you'll see some more of that going on. You've got to do what you've got to do, but is there any component of the embalming process that still makes you uncomfortable and or queasy even after all your years in the industry? Not part of the embalming process. I think when it comes to handling individuals, there are some things that still are kind of gross to me, that just, you can't control your response to things. I don't like when bodies are not how they should be, like a broken bone. It still kind of creeps me out. And I get this comment, I get some backlash on, but I don't love stomas, like colonoscopy bags and stuff to push the stoma back in. It just, I don't know. It just always has bothered me and I can't change it. I'm way better than I used to be, but it's just one thing that still bothers me a bit. And phlegm, any like thick, it makes you just gag when there's a lot of phlegm that comes out of the mouth where a lot of snot out the nose. And that's just because it's just a response. It's just an auto response of my body. I can't help it. But there's a few things that just kind of bother me. How long does the blood remain liquid in the body after death? Does it eventually solidify or coagulate? It begins clotting immediately, if not before death. If the person has been laying for a while and things, the blood will coagulate before. So sometimes when it may be only hours after death and the whole body can be just super full of clots. And so there's a lot of different variables to that. All right, we're going to do one more question. What do funeral homes do with medical implants such as titanium plates and rods when a body is cremated? So all of those metal things go to be recycled. And there's recycle companies that take that all, they will recycle it, and then a funeral home can choose who all that money is donated to. And they usually pick a different organization every year that money is donated to. So it's recycled. Oh, have you ever watched Return of the Living Dead? Yes, I think I've seen every version. Return of the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Morning of the Living Dead, like Coffee with the Living Dead, whichever ones. I've probably watched all of them over time. All right, guys. Well, thank you for checking in on this surprise Coffee with Kari video, and I will see you soon. Make sure to check out the 2-minute from today about green blood. Bye, guys.